This is the Aramark Emergency Action Plan training. Next slide. Next slide. Scope and objective of plan. This plan identifies the potential emergency situations that could occur in Aramark operations. The intent of this emergency action plan, hereinafter referred to as EAP, is to prepare for such emergency situations and provide for effective emergency response. This plan is only designed to address emergencies associated within our service operations, and it is envisioned that the plan will be used in conjunction with the building owner's emergency action plan. Examples of emergencies that would require the use of the building owner's EAP include, but are not limited to, fires, severe weather events such as high winds and flooding, etc., civil disobediences, bomb threats, etc. This plan assumes that the structures in which Aramark is operating are designed and constructed in accordance with basic international fire safety standards, and that common incipient fire controls such as fire extinguishers, sprinkler systems, smoke and heat detectors, and central alarm systems are in place and functioning. The intent of this plan is to prepare for emergency situations and provide for effective emergency response, and includes emergency response procedures to be followed during any emergency situation that is within our scope of services or within our control. It is anticipated that managers and supervisors are familiar with Aramark emergency action plans and are aware of the requirements to be followed during an emergency. General guidelines and priorities. During an emergency at this facility, the following priorities in order should be followed. Life safety, property protection, prevention of business interruption. Remember, at no time should anyone's safety be compromised in an effort to save property or to prevent a business interruption. As stated above, life safety is always the top priority in a fire or any other emergency, and the following guidelines should be followed. Fire prevention and emergency response procedures shall be included in the safety orientation training of all employees. Safe paths should be maintained inside facilities from all Aramark occupied locations to safe refuse areas outside the building for use in the case of emergencies that require evacuation. Clear and unobstructed access to fire detection, alarms, and fire suppression equipment shall be maintained inside any Aramark controlled areas of the facility. Clear and unobstructed access for firefighters shall be maintained. All fire lanes will be clearly marked. This emergency action plan will be made available to all interested parties upon request. Next slide. Applicability. This plan applies to all Aramark personnel and those visitors and contractors under the direct responsibility of Aramark at this site. The intent of the plan is to have one common plan with common procedures that personnel will be familiar with for emergency preparation and during emergencies. Aramark management shall implement this plan and maintain a copy of the written program and all required documentation. Responsibilities. Department Manager. Review of this EAP and becoming familiar with all applicable emergency procedures. Implementation of emergency procedures that apply to their areas and scope of services at the facility. Accounting for all Aramark employees under his or her control at the designated gathering point. Following the proper notification procedures to building security, Aramark team, and others as required in the event of an emergency. Coordinating with and participating in required drill events planned by building security and the owner. Conducting safety observations and correcting identified hazards within Aramark control that could create emergencies. Reviewing and understanding the contents of the emergency action plan prepared by the building owner. Ensure that all facility personnel, contractors, and visitors have reviewed and are familiar with their responsibilities as presented in the plan. Employees. All employees are responsible for complying with each provision of this program and the site's emergency procedures. All employees are required to promptly report any conditions that could adversely affect life safety in an emergency to the appropriate manager. All employees are required to follow safe work practices in their day-to-day operations. Next slide. Emergency evacuation procedures. Evacuation response. There are two basic evacuations or responses that may be required. A full evacuation. A full evacuation may be necessary as a result of our activities or activities outside our control. A full evacuation is considered when the entire facility is affected and the safety of personnel in multiple areas is at risk. All personnel are required to leave the building and go directly to their designated evacuation gathering point. Shelter in place. Shelter in place is a safety method used to house personnel in a building or room to protect them from an outside source such as a chemical release or severe weather conditions. The general guidelines, personnel roles, and responsibilities for shelter in place are similar to those discussed above for a full evacuation. The basic shelter in place guidelines are provided below. The announcement for shelter in place will be broadcast via verbal announcement and alarm. Personnel will gather at their predetermined location in the building or outside the building as warranted by the emergency situation. Evacuation announcement. If the decision is made to evacuate, a clear announcement must accompany the alarms. Evacuation lead. Upon hearing the sound of the alarm or notification of an emergency, evacuation leads are expected to perform the duties. Once these duties are complete, they shall assemble at the evacuation gathering point to be counted. Take absolutely no risk to their own safety. Walk the area they have been assigned in an orderly fashion. Shut the doors behind them. Ask that personnel leave the space. Do not wait for personnel to leave. Move on. Acknowledge any unsafe conditions in their area and report to the evacuation gathering point and report to their supervisors on head count with the head count checklist for the area. Next slide. Head count and accountability. Each person is responsible to account for themselves at the gathering point. Once at the gathering point, they are required to remain calm and quiet while at the gathering point, provide information of any unaccounted personnel to their supervisor or manager, stay at the gathering area until provided an all clear, stay in the area and do not stray from the area, such as toward vehicles, unless allowed by the manager, for example, in extreme weather. Report any information to your supervisor or manager. Report any information to your supervisor or manager if you have knowledge of the emergency. Special needs assistance. Special needs personnel shall have assistants dedicated to assist in the evacuation. Each department is responsible for identifying those personnel with special needs and providing the manager with the name of the person and the name of the primary and secondary person to assist in the evacuation. All clear and return to work procedures. Only building security or owners can establish an all clear, which means the emergency is over. The manager will be provided instructions from the building authorities as to the extent of damage and whether personnel can re-enter the building. Personnel must closely listen to instructions, as it is possible that any fire or damage to the building will limit access and require special instructions for re-entry. Communication during emergencies. Public announcement system. Speakers and alarms are located throughout the designated areas. During drills, supervisors are required to assist in the effectiveness of the warning system, the volume, etc., after the emergency has been controlled, and during the post-incident critique, report any deficiencies to the manager. Incident communication. The Aramark manager is required to contact the building security team of any incident that requires evacuation of the building. A telephone call is required as soon as practical, in which the response to the incident is not compromised. Next slide. Fire emergencies. Fire emergency procedure. If you see a fire or smoke, or if you smell smoke, complete the following steps. Activate the pull station to activate alarms and begin the building evacuation process. Pull stations are located near exit stairways and or building exits. Report the fire to your supervisor or manager and provide the following information: area name, approximate location of the fire, size and type of fire, your name. The supervisor will report the information to security or the manager, who will call the fire company at 911 to report the fire. They will provide the same information as listed above. Exit the building by following posted evacuation routes using stairs only. Do not use the elevators during an emergency. Gas leaks. If you smell a gas leak, inform all personnel in the immediate area to leave immediately. Inform your supervisor or manager or call security immediately. An alarm and an announcement will be made to evacuate the area. Full evacuation is mandatory for a gas leak. Only fire department personnel are authorized to mitigate and respond to a gas leak. Follow evacuation procedures as outlined in Section 4. Next slide.